There comes a point when ethics demands more than silence or compliance, whether it's in a boardroom, whether it's around the braai, wherever it is. It demands action. As leaders, we must ask ourselves, are we brave enough to reject corporate collusion and environmental degradation when profit or self-interest helps us otherwise? We're brilliant as human beings at justifying our own exceptionalism. Oh, it's a special case. Oh, this is just one thing. No, I'm okay. It's just, I'm not really doing that. We have to have a really strong conscience about that. Are we willing to stand visibly, firmly against corruption, against state capture, against exploitation, even when it costs us contracts or contacts or comfort? And the reason is that those things work against the least able, the least privileged, the least of the people who've been given opportunity in society. What state capture, what corruption does, it destroys opportunity for people who are smart and excluded. It doesn't destroy opportunity for the middle class. It destroys opportunity for the majority of South Africans who need opportunity, who we know are very, very smart. Leadership isn't about echoing the crowd, it's about creating a conscience. And when we treat governance as paperwork, dry, procedural, bureaucratic, boring, it's not what governance is. In truth, governance is moral architecture. It's architecture of the morals. That's what governance is, and we all know that. It's the scaffolding that supports the ethical ambitions of our leaders. It's what turns individual courage into institutional culture. And when you read Dr. Khoza's work, you see precisely that, a framework for values-led governance, a vision of systems that are transparent, that are self-correcting, that are humane. It's governance that doesn't constrain leadership, it consecrates it. It makes it something noble, something wonderful. That's what proper ethical values-led governance is about. It's in all of us. We have to aspire to it. Of course, this all sounds tidy in theory. In reality, leadership is super messy, gloriously, painfully human. We all know that. You're going to make mistakes day after day, and you better learn to forgive yourselves and each other around you. But you have to be accountable. You can't just not face it. We're all flawed creatures trying to align our inner compass with the pressures of ambition, expectation, family, survival, all trying to navigate our way through something where there's no real manual, and that's why we need each other. To lead ethically is to live with contradiction, to hold strength and vulnerability in the same hand, to hold your success and your failure, the times you're proud of yourself and the times you're not so proud of ourselves, in the same moment. The best leaders, as Dr. Khoza reminds us, are not those who pretend to be perfect, because none of us are perfect. Perfection isn't given to us, okay? But those who are willing to admit that they're not perfect. And that's what we teach here at Henley, that success without self-awareness is hollow. Reflection isn't a luxury, it's a discipline. All our students do reflection in their programs. And the reflection is the asking of what happened, and then the big thing about so what did that mean? What's the importance of that? And then you can talk about the now what. But the so what is what reflection is all about. It's a discipline of updating our inner maps. Carl Weick, the American organizational thinker, once wrote that we mentally map the territory we lead in. But as the world changes, the map we have doesn't change. And when we get promoted, when the terrain shifts, if we don't watch out, our old maps are what we take into our new situations, and we try and map what we knew before into what's going on around us. And it doesn't work because we're in a new territory. We've changed countries. We're in a bigger scope. So you can't just apply that map. So we've got to learn. We've got to learn, and learning is painful and difficult and confusing. And so we have to learn how to do that. Unless we pause to rethink and redraw them, we start driving down dead ends of our own history. That's why reflection matters. It's not nostalgia, it's navigation. So that's why we reflect. We take our moments out. We go and walk with people. We talk, we run. We take showers, we meditate, whatever it is we need to do to allow that slower mind. We have a fast brain, and we have a slow mind. And the slow mind gives you epiphanies when you least expect it. That's when leaders grow from experience rather than just repeat it. And so as I end, I just want to say, as we read Essential Reflections, we're invited to do just that, to stop, to think, to recalibrate our inner compass, and to understand deeply what reflecting means. It's not just about thinking. You know, there was a book, wonderful book by Daniel Kahneman, by Thinking Fast and Slow, and Hair, Brain, and Tortoise Mind, another book by Guy Claxton. You know, we have this fast frontal cortex, it's always working out. But we have another mind that's working all the time. You wake up suddenly, and suddenly that thing you didn't understand makes sense to you. That's because we have this other deeper mind working all the time. And that's the point of reflection. So today, let's take this moment not only to celebrate a book, but recommit to a principle that leadership at its best, as you've shown us, Dr. Khoza, thank you very much, is an act of service. Thank you. That integrity is not negotiable. That reflection is not retreat. So Dr. Khoza, thank you for the courage, the clarity, the conscience you continue to give to this nation, which I'm very proud to be part of. Thank you for reminding us that ethical leadership isn't a theory. It's a practice renewed every day in the choices we make in every moment. And to all of us here, may we leave today a little braver, a little clearer, and perhaps more importantly, with updated maps and lots of ambition and courage. Thank you very much, Dr. Khoza.
I'm going to introduce my next speaker. Please welcome Professor Bernd Vogel. He's the founder at Henley Centre of Leadership and Professor of Leadership.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much, Jon, for opening this morning. It's a humbling experience to be part of this conversation this morning as an ongoing learner in leadership, how to engage in leadership, but also how to help assist in building leadership practice. So my name is Bernd Vogel. I'm a professor in leadership. I organized the Henley Centre for Leadership here in the UK, but I also have the privilege for now about 2 years to coordinate our Henley Centre for Leadership Africa. And I think, you know, what you have mentioned earlier, Jon, but also the work by Dr. Khoza reflect some of the things that we in a very humble and small way try to push forward. And I'd like to share a bit about that. The Henley Centre for Leadership Africa, its vision or purpose is really about finding positive and optimistic leadership. I'm coming to teach to South Africa and beyond for probably over 15 years now. We did a workshop a few years ago. And one of the observations, and I shared that yesterday with the panelists, that there was a lot of talk about how leadership goes wrong in all places. And from that moment, we decided, why don't we look at the positive practice? Why don't we find the optimistic examples? And that's not a naive position. It's not about being naive about the things that don't work, but really, you know, in view of what we've already learned about Dr. Khoza's work and principles and influence and practice, really find those that make it different. And that could be in big, massive roles, but that is also a day-to-day practice. I think we often underestimate. If you've spoken to your neighbor, I had to speak to my cat, you know, talking about my leadership practice. But when you spoke to your neighbor, you know that there's permanent positive practice. And that's what we say we want to recognize in our center. We want to develop. We want to help transform this and sustain so that positive, optimistic, difference-making, you know, stepping up has the chance to sustain over time, and by that make a difference to society. And so that's really what we are about. The second part is also, we want to learn from the South. You know, I'm a European, I'm based in the UK, I'm from Germany, and I think we underestimate, arrogantly, the power that is there in the practices that we find in Africa and in other areas of the global South. And we want to make a small contribution to unearth this. So we look at, you know, the typical questions, you know, how do top management teams in South Africa work? We look at, Ubuntu Ndlovu with a DBA project that was originated here, but you find a white paper on our website and how that informs leadership excellence, the deeply value collectively embedded ideas. We also asked recently in the workshop, what is Ubuntu? I think that's a really important question, to go beyond the service, to go deep, and that's our job. So we do a very practical thing is you're interested for students to find 1 or 2 pages about leader profiles that make a positive difference to move the real societal issues, right? It's not about just talking about leadership and leadership development in the vacuum, but the real societal issues, how to move the dial. We collected, with the thanks of my colleagues, a number of leader profiles. And I think they address the questions, and I noted, the question of morals, ethics, conscience, the question of to step up, and I'm here to learn, so I'm really curious to learn more. That's what we do at our group: learn about leadership, turn it into practice. And I'm like I said, deeply humbled to be part of this morning, and really looking forward to learn myself, because that's the key question that you keep doing in your whole life. So thank you very much. Thanks for being part of this, and I'm looking forward to more.
My name is Felicity, as I have been introduced. I am on this platform as the project editor of Essential Reflections. And I have the privilege of facilitating today's session. On the stage with me, I have my panelists that I would like to introduce to you. My first panelist is Mr. Monde Ndlovu. Mr. Ndlovu is a strategic thinker and policy advocate focused on economic transformation and inclusive leadership. As the managing director of Black Management Forum, the BMF, he plays a key role in advancing Black leadership and systemic change in South Africa's corporate landscape. Monde is a prolific writer and commentator. He contributes to national discourse on youth empowerment, economic justice, and leadership development. His extensive work in organizational strategy, stakeholder engagement, and governance reflects his commitment to reshaping economic structures for greater equality and sustainable growth. So, Dr. Ndlovu, you've had the privilege of working very closely with different leaders, including Dr. Khoza here. So I would like to know that as both a leader and a student of leadership, what have you learned from leaders like Dr. Khoza about leadership?
Very good morning to yourself, Siswam, Felicity. Good morning, Dr. Khoza, and our fellow panelists, and Professor Jon as well at Henley. And this is also my alma mater, by the way. So thank you very much for coming here. It's always nice to come back home as well. I think for starters, Siswam, one of the things that I think are quite critical as I begin to read Dr. Khoza's works, one of my favorite works is the Africa of My Dreams, which talks about, it's a compilation of his speeches dating back to the 80s, etc. And when you look at that compilation, you look at Let Africa Lead. I'll briefly, I do have a copy, by the way, of Essential Reflections. I want to say something about what I found in there. But the other works, the one key thing is consistency in thinking, consistency in thought. It's one thing for a leader to have a variety of ideas, which is natural. But to have staying power, you've got to sit on a particular idea and keep refining it. And that is one critical thing I've learned from Dr. Khoza and his leadership peers, is that they mastered the ability of coming up with ideas and perspectives and able to build on it and answer the question in many different ways, but building on a particular idea or thought. And so that is why in 1996, and you'll find this when you research about Dr. Khoza, that the BMF gave him a special award as a thought leader, because he sits on ideas and he thinks through them clearly, thoroughly, before he shares them as well. In fact, my late father would describe him as someone who likes to position his public thinking with his private thought That's how we describe Dr. Khoza. And so that's what I've picked up, the consistency in thinking, the consistency in thought, even some of the other works that he would quote, like Frederick Douglass, that you'd find throughout his writings, even his sexual reflections as well. You know, he speaks about Frederick Douglass, he quotes Frederick Douglass as well. Then the question would be, why? Why the consistency in specific ideas and specific thoughts? And that is something that, you know, we all must continuously mine. What is really driving the consistency in ideas, in ideating, and sitting on a particular thought? And I think on the other thing, before I hand back to you, Siswami, is that I haven't finished reading Essential Reflections, but there's two interviews there that really resonated. One was with Babu Sim Shabalala, and Dr. Khoza says at the end of that session, he says there is a psychology concept called sublimation. We sublime, right? So he's saying to Sim Shabalala, our ambitions, or what we seek to still achieve, we achieve it through you. And he was praising Sim Shabalala there in terms of what he represents, and then introduces this concept of sublimation to say that you are an extension of us in what you are achieving as leaders today. And I thought that was quite a powerful ending. The second one, which really touched me, was with Bab Eric Mafuna, who's the founder of the BMF. And you could see the interaction as you are reading. You could almost feel the engagement, the depth of the engagement, and I also dare say, you know, Bab Mafuna, he's one of those leaders who really wants to look for something unique every time. So every time even I talk to him, I know there's something different that's going to come, but it's the same principle. In that discussion, he zooms in on a specific crucible. So he likes to talk about crucibles. Bab Mafuna likes to do that. And I won't give away too much so that you buy the book. But sit on that engagement with Bab Mafuna and Dr. Khoza, and you can see the direction he's moving into what truly drives Dr. Khoza, especially with his philanthropic work, the development of leadership, etc. And what's the story behind that? That's what really struck me when I was going through that particular framing as well. And so those are just some of really my key thoughts about Dr. Khoza, what I've learned, what I continuously learn about, really sitting on certain specific ideas that we want to shape and reshape for the benefit of our country. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful, thank you. I'm going to move to Ms. Chen. She is the Executive Director of the African Leadership Initiative South Africa. She has worked at the intersection of business, governance, and continental collaboration, and is a longtime colleague of Dr. Khoza. Lynette Chen is the Executive Director of the African Leadership Initiative South Africa, ALISA, which is a fellowship program associated with the Aspen Institute of Global Leadership Network. She started her career in the private sector, and during her tenure at Hewlett-Packard, South Africa, she made significant contributions to initiatives such as the ICT BEE Charter and the Presidential International Advisory Council on ICT in South Africa. She has been at the helm of the NEPAD Business Foundation, where she successfully mobilized private sector support and collaboration with the public sector and civil society to implement the African Union's new partnership for Africa's development, which is NEPAD objectives. Lynette was often invited by multilateral and regional organizations such as the United Nations, African Union Commission, UNECA, and the African Development Bank to provide private sector input and insights into developing African and regional integration strategies. She has served on the board of directors of FENARPEN, and a continental organization focused on impacting policies in the agricultural sector, as well as enablers, which focuses on developing and financing entrepreneurs in South Africa. Her dedication to leadership development was further recognized when she became a fellow of the Aspen Institute African Leadership Initiative in 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Lynette Chen. Lynette, if I may ask, you've worked closely with Dr. Khoza, and you've seen how Dr. Khoza lead and model ethical leadership across multiple spheres. What would you say are the key lessons that you have learned from him and his leadership style?
Great. Good morning, everybody, and thank you to Dr. Khoza, first of all, and Felicity. So my journey started with Reuel Khoza when we both founded the NEPAD Business Foundation in 2001. When President Mbeki was one of the founding fathers of the initiative called NEPAD, and saw the potential for Africa's revival and vision by Africans implemented, for Africans implemented by Africans. And that was a huge call to gather private sector together to say that if Africa is going to prosper, we need investment, which will grow economies. And through growing economies, you create jobs. And that's the only way that we will alleviate poverty. And at that stage, there were about 40 companies, big private sector companies, gathered around the table. And for months, we deliberated what should we do with this big audacious goal of lifting Africa out of poverty, and what could we do as private sector. And so for 14 years, I've had the privilege of journeying down that road with Dr. Khoza. And the biggest things that I've learned from him is particularly from his book, Let Africa Lead. You mentioned, the question that is in the preface of the book around, if not us, then whom, and if not now, then when. And he challenged us to take up the mantle of taking this big vision for Africa and implementing it. And through our journey, people would always ask me, so what is NEPAD? And it's this, another big vision that the AU has put forward, and who's going to do it? And my answer was, well, we are Africans. We are the ones that have to do it. And so Dr. Khoza has taught me a couple of things in terms of his great vision for Africa, and that no big vision is insurmountable. And so I remember just 2 years into the NBF, we had just really started the organization, and he said to me, I want us to work in partnership with the SADC Secretariat. And the next thing I want is for us to have an MOU with the African Union. I thought, oh my word, we are like 2 years young, and we're based in South Africa, and I have no idea how we're going to do this. But he set those goals and the vision, and within the next 5 years, we had attained those. And so it's really about working with a chairman and a visionary who sees the potential opportunity and sets it out for you. And at the time, you don't know how you're going to get there, but he encouraged all the way and led all the way on how we achieve that. The biggest things I've learned from Reuel is to be, he said, Africa demands bold, courageous leadership. And we've seen that through the way that he has questioned the political leadership of this country in our darkest moments. And he was the single voice that stood up and questioned it. He spoke up what everyone else was thinking and took a lot of flack for it. And so that bold, courageous leadership, I will always bear in mind when I'm faced with difficult challenges. And the Dean spoke about when faced with questionable, when you painted in a corner around ethics and governance, do you have the bold and courageous leadership to stand up for what is right? And that is a really difficult challenge. The other thing that I learned from Reuel is his humility. And when you speak to Reuel about this book, Essential Reflections, he said to Prof. Mkondo said, we have to document your life. And all the lessons that you, and wisdom that you need to impart to others. And Reuel's response was, it would be a great exercise in vanity for me to write about myself, an autobiography. And so I agree with Prof that we need to know about all the different facets of rule and his impact on South Africa and Africa. And so the book, Essential Reflections, is written in a very innovative way, which I love, which is a series of interviews from people who have worked with rule for many years. So I really encourage you to buy the book. But really it's about humility and whatever global stage or arena that rule has stood on, he never boasts about where he's from and his title. And that's the biggest thing I learned, is like to be humble in your leadership. You can lead without a title.
Thank you, thank you. By the way, Lynette Chen is also a contributor to Essential Reflections. Her chapter is chapter 11 on Pan-African vision and strategy. Our next panelist is Professor Vogel. Professor Vogel is a professor in leadership, founding director of Henley Centre of Leadership UK and Henley Centre of Leadership Africa, and research division lead at Henley Business School, University of Reading. Professor Vogel's research and practice focuses on strategic leadership to mobilize and maintain healthy organizational energy and performance, senior management teams, future of work and leadership, organizational-wide leadership capability, transformation, change and culture, and leadership development. He has more than 25 years working with global companies, public sector organizations, business schools, and universities. And he also ran the podcast called Leadership Unlocked and has published numerous books and papers. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Bernd Vogel. Prof, your research focuses on leadership as an ongoing practice of reflection and growth, which is something that deeply aligns with Dr. Khoza's philosophy and is actually covered quite extensively in Essential Reflections. So in your view, what makes the African leadership experience unique, and how can reflection and continuous leadership help leaders here turn challenges into opportunities?
Thank you very much. You know, two questions, but let me qualify. And I think in the practice of reflection, let's face it, I'm an outsider. If I pretend to know, judge, evaluate, the South African, broader African context, you really need to think about that if you make any comments, right? So I think that's important to have in mind. And that's, I think, the first lesson as a leader or engaging in leadership. Think about your assumptions when you approach these really, really important questions, and, particularly when you're from the North. I think in my experience, the unique experience, that I had the privilege to work with in our group, but also working with, numerous students, particularly around leadership, is that most of our conversations start actually not with leadership, but with a real challenge. And I think that's a bit a difference to some of the work that I'm doing in the Northern Hemisphere. We often focused on leadership and what is leadership, but and indulge ourselves even in that. And I feel a very different understanding of that than we're in conversations and I have in your region, where actually what is the problem? Society, business, global perspectives, and how can leadership be in service of that? And I like that. And so that's a massive contextual difference that I had to learn. The first online event that we had, from our group was about water. And you wouldn't think about that in the first way. And that's something actually where the North can learn. I think we are having still the luxury in our leadership conversations, to be more in neglect of some of the societal and business issues and just sugarcoat over them. I think it's an immense contextual asset that, South Africa and other countries have in how they look at that. It's not that we're not doing that, we're doing that. The second part is, for me, this idea of reflection and growth, which is essential. And the questions about assumptions and the morals and the question of compass and recalibrating are a key question. And we see that actually, interestingly, in both worlds, and that's happy. But I like to highlight when I write reflection in some of my activities, I write reflection with an A in the middle, because I think what I've learned from so far from Dr. Khoza's work is the question of reflection, but also putting that into acts of leadership, into behavior. And that is the key question that we need to look at. And from that, you grow and it becomes a positive cycle about how we grow development. And that is a key question. The last one I like to share is going back to the question of loneliness. Reflecting and growing seems to be a lonely path. I think when you really look at bold and courageous acts, it becomes a lonely act, but it also becomes actually a group, a momentum act, because other people wait for you to be courageous and bold. And by that, you overcome your loneliness. And I listen to those that wait for the position that you have from your reflection and growth to act, and all of a sudden it creates momentum, and leadership becomes leadership and not only leading as an individual. And that's a fascinating piece that I picked up immediately when starting to learn about Dr. Khoza's work. So thank you very much.
And now we turn to the man of the hour, Dr. Reuel Khoza. It is truly extraordinary how much Dr. Khoza has achieved within one lifetime, guys. When you look at your life versus his, you start asking yourself questions, eh? And not merely in just scale, but in substance as well. He stands as a reminder of what is possible when leadership is guided by discipline, by purpose, and by reflection. And I wanted to do a summary of his work, but I think what I would rather do is I'm going to read you his biography. It's shortened, it's 1 page. It is in the book. And just to give you a glimpse of the magnitude of his achievement, distinguished Africanist, thought leader, business leader, president of the Institute of Directors, South Africa, public speaker, and change agent, Dr. Reuel J. Khoza stands at the forefront of transformation in the South African political economy. Widely regarded as a role model, he exemplifies the civic duty and national responsibility that engaged citizens can and should embody. With more than 40 years of executive management experience, Dr. Khoza currently serves as chairman of Zana Investments, chairman of Discovery Bank, and Discovery Bank Holdings, and director of Jubilee Metals Group. He is also chairman of Tlaisani Capital. In parallel with his business leadership, Dr. Khoza has made a significant contribution to higher education in South Africa. He is currently, amongst all of the other things that I've said already, currently Chancellor of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and formerly served as Chancellor of the University of Limpopo and Medunsa. He holds the title of, I love this one, Emeritus Professor Extraordinaire. Halal. At the University of Stellenbosch Business School, and is a visiting professor at Rhodes University Business School, Free State Business School, Wits Business School, where he lectures on corporate governance, business leadership, business strategy, and marketing communications. And you think that would be the end, ne? Dr. Khoza is the author of several influential works, including NAFCOC Milestones, A History of Black Organized Commerce and Industry, Attuned Leadership, African Humanism as Compass, Let Africa Lead, The African in My Dream, The Power of Governance, which he co-authored with Mohammed Adam, The Spirit of Leadership, the South African Handbook of Agency, Freedom and Justice, Citizens in Conversation, which he co-authored with Professor Mushe, he co-edited with Professor Mushe Ngondo. And beyond boardrooms and books, Dr. Khoza is also an avocado pear farmer with a passion for writing lyrics and producing music. He's produced 9 CDs. Yeah. Again, check yourselves. His previous leadership roles include serving as chairman of Assupol Group, Nedbank Group Limited, Eskom Holdings, GlaxoSmithKline South Africa, Globalec, and the Public Investment Corporation. He has also held directorship at the JSE Limited, IBM South Africa, Liberty Life Group, Standard Bank Group, Nampec Limited, and Old Mutual PLC. Dr. Khoza played a pivotal role in shaping corporate governance in South Africa through his involvement in the formulation of the King Codes, King 2, King 3, King 4, serving as Mervyn King's deputy in the latter two. I believe you are doing the next, okay, yeah, okay, that's fine. His exceptional contributions have earned him numerous accolades. In 2022, he was honored with the Lifetime Achievement Awards by both the All Africa Business Leadership Awards and in partnership with CNBC Africa, and the Black Agencies Network Association. In April 2024, the University of Pretoria awarded him the Chancellor's Medal for his outstanding achievements in business, academia, and authorship. Later that year, he received the Sunday Times Lifetime Achievement Award, and most recently, he has been inducted into the prestigious Thinkers 50 Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Reuel Khoza.
Felicity, thank you very much for those very kind words of introduction. I think you've been hyperbolic. You could very well have said, I introduced to you Reuel Khoza, who inter alia is a capitalist without capital. But thank you very much. What she went through was covered in 76 years of existence. So it feels much, but in 76 years, if you apply yourself, you could achieve a bit like that, I think. So thank you very much, and I thank God Almighty I thank God Almighty for actually sustaining me. I see we have in our midst people that I worked with at Nedbank, people I worked with at Eskom, people I worked with at PIC. So attesting to the authenticity and reality of what was said by way of my having spent time in some of those organizations. I need to thank you, Monde, for being an extension of your dad. I worked with your dad for over 2 decades. And at one stage, people mistook us for twins, and he was the brighter and more handsome twin. But our friendship actually ran very, very deep. So thank you very much for taking the baton from him and running with it. Lynette, indeed, we worked together for 12, 13, 14 years on the NEPAD Business Foundation. And I want to believe that organizations that succeed are those that have the chairperson and the chief executive working together in near perfect tango. And ours was essentially like that, to work very, very closely together. And I want to believe that we did have some impact on SADC, and as you said, on the rest of the continent. By the time I retired from the chairmanship of the NEPAD Business Foundation, we were running courses jointly with the IOD as far afield as Egypt. So thank you very much. Her contribution to the book is in fact a summary, an abridged version of what she wrote as a contribution to the book, which you can access in her own website. It's double the length and double the depth, double the width. Thank you very much, Lynette, for having been such a colleague. I have to thank you, Prof. Jon, for the welcome and the introduction. By the time you finished, I felt like that was a kind of, in terms of the thought processes, a kind of an in vivo eulogy. Thank you so much for summarizing my ideas and enriching them in the wake of that to the extent that you did. Prof. Vogel, we also had occasion to chat yesterday. I cherish and respect the work you do from those dizzy heights of London. We learn a fair bit from them, and hopefully we can also contribute to re-civilizing Europe in due course. Friends, I have to thank you. I'll say something about gratitude down the line. I don't want to talk for long. One mistake anybody could make is to call a pseudo author to come and give a talk, because they can talk almost like forever. Attuned leadership is 530 pages long, and it's written in English, and I'm not English. So, but thank you very much for coming over. I'll say something by way of thanking all of you in the wake of my brief talk. But allow me to say a few things by way of ground clearance. Every one of us as individual, we as society, we as organizations are in the process of becoming. There is no standing still. If you do stand still, you actually go backwards. So you got to stay with it. Unless you stay with it, in no time you will become an anachronism, a relic of a period gone by. But I want to believe that where we are concerned here, we would rather be and belong to the present, but would rather be harbingers of the future. We are all, as individuals, as societies, as nations, as humanity, competing for the future. And unless you actually engage, you'll be left behind. You will actually, intellectually and psychologically atrophy. You'll die on your feet. And there's nothing worse than being a walking ghost. But unless you actually stay with it, stay engaged, that's what you'll become. You'll fancy you are living when in fact you are merely existing. The future is something that is predicated on vision. And vision and accomplishing a vision is not a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. And that's what we need to be aware of as members of this society. With all of the features that you actually covered, Prof, including competence, including ethical conduct. I want to believe that anybody who wants to lead me in the 21st century has got to meet certain criteria. And we as members of the intelligentsia, we should actually articulate those criteria. And in the next election, I would like to persuade all of us and those who are within hailing distance of our voices to insist that there shall be criteria that these leaders have got to satisfy. You don't just stand there and mouth a lot of platitudes and expect us to follow you. So I think there should be prescription. But not only that, there should also be proscription. We should also proscribe who should not lead us. And amongst those proscription, anyone who does not stack up on the criterion of knowledgeability, give way. Anyone who cannot relate to globalization because the world has become a neighborhood, give way. Anyone who cannot deal with complexity, who would be perplexed by complexity, stand aside. Anyone who is unethical, please stand aside. And as members of the intelligentsia, I throw down the gauntlet. We should actually advocate that. Otherwise, as a nation, we'll continue to unravel. In fact, we have raveled far enough. A nation that cannot provide water to its citizenry, cannot provide energy reliably to its citizenry, cannot actually take care of its infrastructure. Even though it might be called emergent, I want to believe that it is in fact submerging. And our political economy is submerging. So I think we better do something about that. As individuals, we should self-liberate and then liberate those around us. So that essentially is what I wanted to say by way of introduction. If you allow it, let me say something about thanking you for coming over to listen to this follow-up launch of the book. I need to thank you, and then I'll just give 3 abstracts from the 21 interviews. And for the rest, I'll leave it to you to actually go and explore. I want to believe that gratitude is, in fact, the best attitude. And ingratitude, the worst. So I want to say something that I am grateful to you coming to the launch of the book. Not merely, my gratitude is not merely a polite gesture, but a philosophical grounding. Gratitude, in my humble opinion, is the soil from which ethical leadership grows. It reminds us that we are stewards, not owners. That our achievements are interwoven with the sacrifices of others, and that humility is not weakness, but wisdom. Because we are launching this book in an academic institution, a business school, allow me to articulate a very, very brief commentary on scholarship as the architecture of thought. Scholarship is not the accumulation of credentials. It is the disciplined pursuit of truth. It is the architecture of thought and undergirds principled leadership. In times of moral fog, scholarship offers clarity. In moments of populist fervor, it offers ballast. Let us therefore cultivate leaders who read deeply and not just thrive on sound bites, but who read deeply, think critically, and speak with intellectual integrity. For without scholarship, leadership becomes mere performance. I am delighted, Prof, that in fact you are rated among the top 100 on the globe. Thank you very much and congratulations. Can I comment briefly on ethics, because it's one of the challenges that we're grappling with from day to day. Ethics, the compass within. Ethics is our internal compass, not a set of rules imposed from without, but a moral orientation from within. It is what guides us when no one is watching. In governance, ethics is the difference between stewardship and exploitation. In business, it is the line between profit and plunder. We must teach our youth that ethics is not optional, it is existential. Mention has been made of me having pretensions to be a musician. Perhaps I could use music by way of concluding. Use music as a soundtrack for integrity. Music not just about tempo, but tone. Not just about performance, but composition, creation. Integrity is the soundtrack of ethical leadership. It is the underlying score that gives coherence to our decisions, cadence to our conduct, and resonance to our legacy. In African tradition, music was never entertainment alone. It was instruction, invocation, identity. Drums summoned the village. Songs preserved history. Melodies carried moral codes. So too must leadership become a musical act where values are the notes, strategy the rhythm, and conscience the key. The soundtrack of integrity means, amongst others, leadership in tune with truth, not noise. Noisemakers, we have galore. Harmonizing personal ambition with collective good, listening deeply before speaking boldly, composing decisions that echo beyond the moment. A leader out of tune, remember we're using music as metaphor. A leader out of tune with integrity may dazzle the crowd, but will dissonate with history. A leader who conducts with conscience creates symphonies of impact. Let us then ask, what is the rhythm of our leadership? What notes do our actions strike in the hearts of others? What legacy will our soundtrack leave behind? Ubuntu teaches us that we exist in relation, and music reminds us that the relation is rhythm. Leadership must therefore be attuned to context, to community, to conscience. For in the final analysis, the most enduring leaders are not those who play the loudest, but those whose soundtrack of integrity continues to inspire long after the final note. Let us lead with harmony. Let us govern with rhythm. Let our legacy be a song of substance. Thank you very much.
One of the questions that we received was on the, it actually reads like this. It says that we often talk about the gap between seasoned and young leaders. So in your view, how do we bridge that gap, ensuring that the wisdom and ethical grounding of the older generation meets the innovation and urgency of the younger ones? How do we create meaningful transition rather than rivalry between the two generations?
Thank you very much, Siswam. Thank you very much again, Dr. Khoza. Thank you for the words of encouragement as well. And you linked a very crucial story about my father. Maybe as a last point, there's something I think quite unique about that. But I'll come to that. I think firstly, what could create the gap, or some of the issues that create the gaps between young and old, is the mere fact that we state it as such. So we talk about a generational gap. We talk about the old, we talk about the young as if they are completely separate entities, unrelated, unattached to one another. I think that's one of the first challenges. And young people run with this thing, even saying statements like old people must get out of the way. They must just get out of the way. I read a statement the other day where a group of young people were taking the former president to task about some of his utterances. They even mentioned in the statement there that he must just go and rest and deal with his grandchildren or something of that nature. So when you now have an emerging group of young people that see no value in respect, you may differ with President Mbeki, you may differ with all sorts of presidents, you may differ with senior leadership, but there are principles that will never be removed because you disagree with the individual. And so those are some of the challenges that exist when young people begin to view and define senior leaders in the country at a macro level, even at a micro level as well. We may also forgive them up to a certain point because there's been a lot of disappointment by senior leaders in the country in how they've behaved, in the decisions that they've taken, and how they've been unable to fully bring young people into the mainstream economy, in the mainstream of opportunities, etc. Over the weekend, Professor Nick Binedell said an interesting story. He stated that every generation, speaking about his father, every generation, when they look at the next generation, they seem to believe that they are a lost generation. And so he raises that to say that actually my father said this about me because he looked at how I was dressed, he looked at my hairdo, looked at this innovation we talk about, this energy that we talk about that's coming from young people. And old people always then seem to be more concerned that you guys might be a lost generation. And so he raises that because, again, the discussion was about leadership and building pipeline as well. So he was also challenging the fact that some senior leaders may be a little bit too critical with some young people, especially in believing that the next generation is lost. even within that argument, there are good stories to tell in any case, even in South Africa and globally, of what young people are trying to do and those who are emerging. So these are just some of the tensions. We talk about gap. These are some of the tensions that exist between successive generations as well. The next point is that there is a leadership approach, leadership framework called generational thinking or cathedral mindedness. We get it from the Sagrada Familia, which was starting to be built in 1886. And the vision of that architect was to build a cathedral, but he took his time. And every time they would go to him and ask him, when are you finishing the cathedral? And he would say, my client is not in a rush. My client is not in a rush. I'm not in a rush. And so, you know, just be patient, building this thing going forward. And so he ended up dying at a certain point in time, but the cathedral stood the test of time. In fact, when you research it as well, it even survived the Civil War. So even other people that comment on the structure itself, that even the kind of cement that was used, there's a certain kind of a material that was used that was able to withstand the vicissitudes, the challenges of the time and the Civil War that took place, and it stood. And so there are many lessons we can bring from here, but I just want to pivot on one or two. In that one, just like the Sagrada Familia, when we're trying to build something, where are we building to? What are we building? Where is South Africa going at a macro level? Where are we going at a micro level? What is our role at a micro level in building this cathedral called SA Inc.? As we build the cathedral called SA Inc., there's different role players in building South Africa, the cathedral itself. And so when there's no clarity of where South Africa is going, then these gaps will continue to exist, because how young people define South Africa vis-a-vis more experienced leaders is completely different, let alone the race challenges that we face in the country that are transformational in nature, which is another complexity which we must not shy away from, to say there are deep-seated complexities in how we view the country, in how we view where we are going, in what we want to build. And so the challenge that it gives us is to clearly define, what are we transforming and into what? Who are we transforming it for and why? And who is part of the transformation and who is not? So these are more questions than answers around how do we bridge the gap between senior leaders, experienced leaders, and emerging leaders as well. The other thing which the Sagrada Familia teaches us is buying time, is building for purpose. So I should not bring 50 bricks because there won't be any intentionality, but I can bring one brick. So what is that one brick that I want to bring as my contribution to building the country and building things going forward? The other piece that it also introduces us to is, and I'm coming now to my father's story, is how senior leaders should be and ought to be very intentional in dragging young people into specific spaces. Now, he did that with me without my permission, against my own agency. I didn't like it, but over time, it served me well. I appreciate the fact that I was dragged by him. Not only by him, and over time, dragged by Eric Mafuna, dragged by Dr. Khoza, dragged by Mncane Mthunzi, dragged by Professor Wiseman Kushu, and allowing ourselves as young people to sit and learn at the feet of senior leaders. Now, that's something that is also missing as well. So we don't create enough of those spaces where we bring the senior leaders and emerging leaders to have continuous engagements, to continuously build. So, I mean, it's not every day that young leaders or emerging young professionals would be able to engage a Professor Nkushu, a Dr. Khoza, etc., if we don't create the platforms to do so. And so we've got to be intentional in that way so that they're able to see that where they have reached, the heights they have reached, they've not reached them by chance. Dr. Khoza said it was by choice, and withstanding the challenges that come with sustaining the choice, the consistency that comes with deciding to make a difference and to stand on a particular principle. So we've got to bring these elements together. We've got to bring young people, emerging leaders, even more. We are attempting to do so, but we're not doing it sufficiently so that we're able to see and learn. Maybe the last point is that there is a lack of patience, especially from a development point of view of young people. You want to reach the top as fast as you can, but you miss out on so much in terms of your building blocks as a leader. And we know that there's a 10,000-hour rule, etc. So that takes time. Leadership takes time. Building takes time. Authenticity takes time. And so we should not parachute young people if they are not ready. And only the wise senior leaders can see when leaders are ready and when they are not ready. And so accepting that I need to spend X amount of time, stay in the furnace to be burnt, with these principles, take the time. Because once you emerge, there is no reverse button. And that's part of the challenge is that when we see very senior leaders who emerge too quickly and they are exposed, that they're actually unprincipled as they make decisions. Maybe a last story. We were part of an engagement and with a professor of economics. So we're dissecting microeconomics, the implications to the future, lack of economic growth, all the technical things we enjoy talking about. At the end of that discussion, we were afforded an opportunity to ask the professor anything. Ask him any question about anything. So, this can be dangerous, by the way. And then people asked him all sorts of things. And then I felt, let me ask him this question. Prof, tell me, what are your 3 top values? He kept quiet. He couldn't answer. He says, you know what? I actually don't know. And so what I learned from that is that we take values for granted, in that these are soft skills. Personal mastery is a soft skill. We're looking at the technical, technocrats, but at the heart of driving IQ is EQ as well. And EQ sustains an organization, sustains a business, sustains a family, sustains a country. And if you have leaders that are technically sound but lack the depth of values, then we don't have a future. And so values-driven leadership becomes critical as we build the next generation of leaders in utilizing this model of Sagrada Familia. Thanks.
That is excellent. Thank you so much, Ntate Monde. I'd actually like to follow that up, if I may turn to you, Dr. Khoza, on something that Ntate Ndlovu said here, and maybe follow that up with a question that says that is maybe the challenge that each generation assumes it has more to teach than to learn.
I believe we all given to presumptuousness, at times preposterous presumptions. So each generation will be engaged in excessive dalliance with self-importance and talk about things as though they had not been spoken about or thought about before. And to add to the contribution by Monde, my sense where bridging the generation gap is concerned is that the challenge is to make sure that we do not continually reinvent the wheel. If we do that, we will end up essentially moving on a treadmill and get nowhere. You'll wake up the sweat, but show no fruit for it. So my suggestion would be that, and then we've had this in South Africa in a very, very dramatic and painful manner, when there was a change of guard between President Mbeki and President Zuma. We actually suffered the massive failure of misunderstanding the need to build institutions. I worked with both of them, and in that succession, the successor wanted to erase just about everything about his predecessor simply because they had personal differences. And there's a fundamental misunderstanding of their role as leaders there. They are merely expressions of the link in what you might call national development. So to actually treat your leadership as a kind of fiefdom and say there is a sense in which I don't care about my predecessor because we got these differences, you're doing an entire nation a major disservice. And I dare say some of the trials and tribulations, the pains we are going through, are a function of that failure to hand the baton to the next leader in a manner that says we are supposed to build institutions. And that failure did South Africa back big time.
Scathing. Thank you, Dr. Khoza. I think let me move into the second challenge, Ms. Lynette. The question that we received, it was, in actual fact, we combined them into one dilemma that alluded to a crisis in authenticity, leaders who look good rather than leaders who do good. So the question being that in an age where leadership can become more about optics and rather than substance, how would you advise leaders who have to deal with performative leadership in place of authentic leadership?
Thank you, Felicity. So when we talk about authenticity, and particularly linked to the theme today around reflection to action, I think as leaders, we need to take time to pause and step back from the busyness of our lives and the action to really sit quietly and reflect on who we are. It's really about self-awareness, who we are, how do we lead, and what do I want to lead towards? And particularly on the how we lead. I think only from, and the who I am, first of all, understanding who I am and what values do I stand for. That is where you start understanding who you are authentically. And particularly as a woman leader and a woman in business, often we feel that when we go into these boardrooms filled with men, and I've been many occasions where I've been the only woman in a boardroom full of men, we feel intimidated or feeling that we have to prove ourselves. And we feel that perhaps we have to lead like a man. And in my experience is we do not have to do that, because there's this softness about women that they bring a different dynamic and energy to a room, that men who are ego-driven may not resolve issues without the EQ of a woman's perspective. And so that you can only do when you know who you are at a deeper level and what values you stand for. So it's really about self-awareness. And often as women leaders as well, in my experience is when you walk into a boardroom of men, you often feel that you have to know double the amount of what they know so that they do not question you. You have to be aware of what you look like, how you conduct yourself. But at the end of the day, if you know your stuff, there's no way that anyone can question your authenticity. So just really encourage women leaders to not try and be like a man in the boardroom. And when you look at, for example, when I was appointed as CEO of NEPAD Business Foundation at quite a young age of 38, it comes with the weight of responsibility and accountability. And at that young age, I was quite overwhelmed with the title, gosh, what does being a CEO mean? What example do I have to set? Who do I have to and behave like? And so I was really privileged that Dr. Khoza, through his manner in which he, and you'll read in his book as well from the excerpt on Wendy Lucas Bull, is that I was very privileged to have a chairman like Dr. Khoza, who even at a young age walked me side by side with me, paid me the due respect and listened intently to ideas that we could co-create the vision, even though at times I felt like I did not have the skills to even deliver on what he wanted and what he wanted for the organization. And to have that trust and to have those leaders who are walking beside you, believe in you, is also to question yourself and say, how do I want to be led? And look at those qualities and then intentionally develop those qualities in yourself in the way that you lead your teams. So people always want to be seen and heard and listened to, and allow collaboration and communication within your teams on how they envision the organization. So it's not one leader saying, that's what I want and that's what we're all going to do, whether you like it or not. It's really about intently listening, creating the compassion, the communication between you and your team. And in through being that, even authentically showing your vulnerabilities. And that was one of the lessons I learned leading the MBA with growing team, 20 people, and everyone would look to you to say, you have to know all the answers. And it's exhausting. I would go into the office and there'd be a queue of people outside my door waiting to see me to give them direction. And eventually it's too much. And so it's also about, as a leader, letting go of the control and empowering others and your team to make decisions. And if they mess up, to expect them to fix their messes as well and mistakes. And through that, you feel a lot of relief, as well as more support through your team, knowing that you have vulnerabilities as well, that you don't have all the answers, that you are not perfect. And that is really being your authentic self. And so as a leader, not trying to be the one that's at the helm all the time, but rather to lead in partnership with. And so, you know, as a leader, one of the things that held true for me is one of the words that Reuel uses, which Reuel uses a lot of big words, but one of them that has stuck with me for a long time is the word compunction, that which prickles the conscience. And I think that if you hold that as one of your core values as a leader, it holds your values, your ethics in line throughout your leadership journey. And so if you are authentic in yourself and understand the principles by which you lead and stick by them, it also means that you are more focused around delivery rather than posturing and being the person on stage when your whole team has actually done the work. It's about acknowledging them and acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. And then just in terms of some of the work that we encourage in the Africa Leadership Initiative, we gather leaders from all different sectors to come together around the table to understand that within your leadership role, you have power and influence. And the question is, how are you using that sphere of power and influence to create a better society? And so the question I always ask at the interviews is, what keeps you awake at night? And South Africa is faced with a myriad of challenges at the moment. And so what is the one thing that you could do within your sphere of power and influence to create a better society? Government is not coping on its own. And why are we waiting for government to deliver everything for us? Right? We have to take up the mantle and say, this is the problem. If I'd like to fix education or health or something that's close to me at home. I have the power to make a difference, however small, that's your responsibility as a leader, not just to make profit for your organization, but what are you going to do to create a better society?
The question that I will pose to you that we received, one of the questions was about how can leaders sustain continuous learning and self-renewal in environments that demand constant performance and certainty? How can leaders keep growing intellectually and ethically as a cornerstone of leadership practice?
Thank you very much. And I try to be brief, and I like to go back to what Lynette was saying earlier about men seem to be leading like men. I don't think they actually know how to lead like men. I think they pretend to lead like men, and that's part of the non-learning that I think this question goes to. I even go further that on that side, it's a question of assumptions. And I don't make friends when I'm saying that the context of male and female people in leadership is extremely difficult. They're very different, very difficult, different lived experiences. But what we call male or female leadership is an assumption, is a projection, and it's kind of moving on from this because, like I say, many male leaders are really not good male leaders. Even if we look at that provision, and that goes back to your question about ongoing learning, and how do we keep the self-renewal, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that in your whole career, because you're making a career by achieving. And when you've been told that you achieve, there's a challenge of becoming complacent and let rest on your laurels, right? I'm a professor, that's always a good soundbite, right? That's kind of, oh, cool, so you need to make sure that you actually push back others in giving you too much clout in a way so that it doesn't become a self-inflicted non-learning cycle, because people permanently give you that. And that's a challenge for senior people who we want to work with, who we want to appreciate. But we need to carefully listen then to these voices and keep asking and questioning ourselves whether this is what we've built our success yesterday on. Does it work today? And I like the balanced view of thinking there's path dependency in some of your comments. There's things that you also learn that you need to keep doing things because they work, right? It's not the permanent revolution of everything, but it's the questioning that we need to do. What can we keep doing as managers in powerful position, and where do we need new things? And the question of reflection, assumption, having a proper sounding board. I think if you feel lonely, to come back how we started, I think that's the first alarming signal, because then you don't have a sounding board, and also you don't trust anymore other people, right? It's the responsibility that's a heavy weight, but that doesn't mean that you need to deal with everything yourself. So where are your trusted advisors? Where are your mentors in your entire career, as senior as you are? And I've been very, very humbled by advice that I've got in my whole life. And then you need to listen to advice. That's a real tricky one, right? If you're really successful, we do an interview series, the listening part. We might be good at asking, but do we truly listen to understand? Or do we listen to be seen as listening? And the more successful you get, the more you get all this information that you're good, right? So I think that's wherever you are in your career, and I think that starts early. How do we keep our openness and appreciate the appreciation that we get, but we take it for a next level of what can I do more in what Dr. Khoza called the becoming, right? It's an ongoing becoming. And once you figure that out, I think you're on a great course to moving on. And I think that solves some of the intergenerational questions, because as a final observation to circling back, I think we need to understand, as whatever generation, what the earlier has achieved, but also as the current generation, we always also needs to ask, what do we really hand over? And there are some big pluses, and there's some really awful things that we hand over, and some of which we know for generations, right? And in a way, but we still pretend they're not issues. So there's an interesting tension in there. But that again makes the learning. Once you start thinking, you keep learning, right? So I think that's how I would, in the frame of our conversation, look at the question that you posed, and for this constant self-renewal, but also trust what you're good at over time without becoming complacent.
I want to wrap up our Leaders Clinic by asking Dr. Khoza, a bit of an integrative question from the challenges that we received. What do you believe it will take to cultivate leaders who can bridge across the divides that we've been speaking about now? Leaders who are principled, leaders who are humble and still hungry to learn.
I believe it will take quite a bit. It will take national effort. Growth and development as a nation is a function of socialization when all is said and done. And the kind of socialization that we tend to receive lately is socialization that is limited, that does not inculcate in those up and coming a sense of responsibility, a sense of what is right and what is wrong, a sense of what is good and what is bad. Historically, our education was imbued with a sense of values that was Christian predicated. And then we decided we were going to become a secular, or to introduce a secular type education. And we have not replaced what the Christian education actually inculcated during those of us who have been alive for something like 80 years. My sense is that we should actually introduce in our educational system, in what you refer to as the pedagogy, inculcation of a sound and solid value system. So even as the children grow, they have a sense of what is wrong, what is right, what is good, what is bad, and the sensibility to, beyond that deciphering, to choose the right from the wrong, to choose the good from the bad, in a manner that actually responds to the inner person, what you referred to as the big word. It's not so big, it's just a useful word. Compunction is the pricking of conscience. If we have inculcated a sense of morality in our children as they grow up, and even as they go to university, that compunction will actually be the pricking of conscience that says this is not right. And somehow we have neglected that. And we get surprised when, in fact, later on in life, we actually have to do what is called moral rearmament. And I want to believe that before moral rearmament, there should be armament. And the armament will render moral rearmament redundant. So in essence, that's what I would suggest, and I would like to make one observation about emergent leadership in the 21st century. You have, from certain parts of our country, the resurgence of ethnic, in fact worse, tribal jingoism, where somehow it is a virtue to be 100% Zulu. I don't, in this day and age when we belong to the globe, I don't know if there's anything as counterproductive and retrogressive as being 100% Zulu. In fact, we should strive to be citizens of humanity, citizens of the world. Another trend that I find quite disturbing, even amongst those that fancy they are leaders of the world, is the emergence of the apparently sophisticated tyrant. And they emerge with pseudo applause from a nation that is supposed to be highly sophisticated. but somehow they cannot see through this emergence as the emergence of a cult leader. A cranium ostensibly containing a brain, but essentially empty. I'm not going to mention the name of the country, but all of us actually observe that with pain. And there is a sense in which I think we should actually beware of the emergence of the cult leader who relies on empty slogans and never actually prepares a speech. I mean, whenever allowed to speak, stands there and ramble. And at the end of it, you realize he gave you nothing but a word salad. So these are the kinds of things that I believe we need to be wary of, and we should be authentic. I mean, the most practical definition of authenticity is self-authorship. We should not allow others to define us. We should actually define ourselves, because if you take external forces to define you, you wind up defining yourself with their definition, inimical to your welfare. So beware. May I end there? Thank you very much.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Henley, for allowing us to come and drink from the fountain of wisdom. I want to catch up on one point, Dr. Khoza and Lynette, Mrs. Chen. This embedding in the education system, that compunction, I love the word, I've taken something huge today. This embedding of impunction and allowing for it to be embodied, enacted, and extended in a nation. I'm keen to hear, based on us moving from Christian education to where we are now, what is possible. And the reason I ask for that is, as a scholar, we have a tool called the Umang Companion, which we're trying to scale through Africa and India. And I'm looking for how I build compunction into that companion so that reflection becomes action in a nation.
I want to believe that it commences with the design of curriculum. Our designers, current designers of curricula, and I've worked with a few of them because of my abiding interest in academia, have start at the wrong place. Over the years, they've been designing curricula, and every year they kind of try to refine that which they have been working on as the curriculum over the years, when in fact the world has changed so fundamentally. And my suggestion would be that in fact they should start with the end in mind. Produce graduates who are essentially fit for purpose, who are not just generalists who cannot use knowledge from a basis of knowledgeability. In other words, applied knowledge. If you start with the end in mind, you will in fact be able to design curricula that prepare for the future, not just as extensions of the past. That would be my suggestion, and I work with a good number of them, but having been in the corporate environment, in the corporate arena, I can't remember any curriculum designers from universities coming to corporate leadership and say, what does the corporation of the future actually require from those that we are preparing? And because of that mismatch, you produce deficient human graduates. And I would like to suggest that that's where it actually starts, we should know ourselves as a nation. We should also, in competing for the future, understand what that future holds and prepare for it. And the future will be enjoyed by only those who actually prepare for it adequately.
My question is, so maybe let me first start by saying in South Africa, we host the largest number of African diaspora. How can we use that as an opportunity as opposed to a threat? Because South Africa is increasingly seen as an anti-African immigrant. So how can we change that narrative? Thank you.
How might we change the narrative that says South Africa is anti-African in a very real sense? I think the point of departure is having a philosophy. And that philosophy, where we are concerned, is the philosophy of Ubuntu. There are those that want to dismiss Ubuntu as motherhood and apple pie. And it isn't. It is, in fact, a very, very fundamental philosophy. It is a counterpart to European, if you like, or Eurocentric philosophy that says me, the individual, and myself are the point of departure and the end. In other words, I think, as René Descartes would say, I think, therefore I am. There's nothing more faulty than that, in fact, because even his ability to think was equipped by his mother when he was sitting on the lap of the mother, and through the education system. So there's no such thing as thinking in the isolated citadels of your own existence. Thinking is collective. Thinking is learned from others. Now, Ubuntu actually is the basis of Afrocentricity. In other words, using Africa as your point of departure, where my humanity is interrelated with yours. I find expression only in the context of other human beings. I remember having a debate with one of my mentors in the 80s when I first moved into a board of a bank whose name I won't mention now. My mentor actually said to me, Khoza, stop thinking soft. Think hard. Why is it that you want to peddle the philosophy of Ubuntu? Why don't you read René Descartes? And I said, I happen to have read him. And I actually fundamentally disagree with him. Then he went on to want to prevail on me by saying business or business leadership is not a democracy. And he thought, I mean, that was a QED. Business is not a democracy. And there was pregnant silence on the part of both of us. And my question to him was, if it is not a democracy, what is it? And there was even further pregnant silence. And I said, my understanding of the opposite of democracy is autocracy. Now you tell me how an autocrat, self-centered autocrat, can actually deal with complexity. It doesn't matter how well educated, how intelligent you are, you cannot figure out modern complexity. It will perplex you. You have blind spots. And that was my argument to him. And I said, then it looks like we're hamstrung. I said, yeah, perhaps I should offer a third alternative. And that alternative is meritocracy. And meritocracy behoves people to give scope to fellow human beings. And where your Africa in diaspora is concerned, we would actually like to invite them to delve a little deeper in Ubuntu and understand that in addition to our having our respective personality, there is personhood. Personhood, which is what you actually forge at the interface with other human beings. And it actually begets the necessary outcome of teamwork. Now, I will suggest the best way to deal with Africans in the diaspora is to have Africa as your point of departure. Do more about Afrocentricity and its value in uniting Africa.
My question is, I enjoyed your analogy of leadership in music. I think we can all agree that the song we are listening to in our current leadership in South Africa is somewhat foreign, alien. We go home to listen to the commission and, you know, we oohing and ahhing with the lack of, you know, there's no tune, everything is off tune, the tempo, the entire song is literally off tune. Now, how we're going into elections next year, 2026, how then would you say, do we build this new word that we've learned today, compunction? You said we are responsible citizens, the way we vote and the way we mark our voices or we make our voices heard. How then do we build from now up until the elections, how do we build compunction to the leadership that is going to take this country forward?
No, thank you very much. I would like to briefly respond to that by throwing down the gauntlet to you as a member of this intelligentsia, in particular, the African intelligentsia. You're at this esteemed college that actually teaches you how best to do business. And there are many who actually are with you in that. And you could multiply that with any number of business schools in the country. You could multiply that with any number of institutions of higher learning. Now, my throwing down the gauntlet to you is that you should note that democracy is not a spectator sport. Enter the fray. Don't sit back as an armchair critic and say this buffoonery is actually setting us back and do nothing about it. And in fact, it is actually, in some instances, we have leadership that masquerades as leadership when in fact they're a bunch of clowns. Now, nobody apart from the intelligentsia is going to actually call that to book. Democracy is a participative sport. So enter the fray.
Well, what are the most practical steps we can take to actually change the leadership construct in terms of how we obviously approach the country at the current moment?
You want to know what is practical and pragmatic. And in my humble opinion, what is practical and pragmatic is not sitting back and absorbing the pain. We have absorbed the pain for far too long. And a good number of the people who masquerade as leadership, my sense is, if you look into their background, you'll find that in fact there's emptiness. They have not taken trouble to understand the complexity that comes with the advent of the 21st century. You give them an opportunity to say something, they actually feed you lots of platitudes. Platitudes that was given to them by a speech writer. And I would like to believe that what we should insist on is authentic leadership. I mean, there was so much talk about authenticity. At the individual level, where you sit, there's nothing more liberating than being the author of your own destiny. And you multiply that by a good number of us here. When Mozambique got independent, they were effectively without graduates. I think there were 1 or 2 graduates. And the main leader was actually a male nurse. Samora Machel, when he emerged as a leader, was a male nurse. Here in South Africa, we have now in the region of 4.5 to 5% of the population having tertiary education. What do we do with it? Why should we actually lie prostrate and allow somebody to exploit us to the point where they do bizarre things like buying 5 Lamborghinis? Or alternatively, treasure themselves so much that they have to be actually transported in convoy. A convoy is 7 cars, transporting one soul that is actually adding up to nothing except negativity. I still believe that it actually behoves us to stand up and insist. If we don't, I mean, we're doomed to actually continue to unravel. I'm 76, I'm about to make my transition to eternity. Now I leave it to you as the emergent leadership.
My question is, are there any opportunities for collaboration and co-creation with the masses, with those that might have input towards that great creation of making sure that the current leaders really equip others to live a better state of leadership? I'm talking more in the space of women in boards, women in governing bodies.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. I think you answered it at the end there with the opportunity to collaborate, co-create, and I think that is the name of the game now, going forward. Back then we had organizations standing head and shoulders above others, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are the be-all and end-all. So where we are right now is that we really got to deepen collaboration. So from a BMF point of view, we already do have a partnership with Henley Business School and others as well. So there's a start there as well. So I think part of the takeouts that we need to do as implementable coming from this engagement is that how do we get together as these organizations under the stewardship of Dr. Khoza and his ideas? How do we co-create? Secondly, just very briefly, on Dr. Khoza's emphasis on Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a key value of the BMF as well. And part and parcel of the drive that he's been doing since the 80s is to inculcate that mindset into senior leadership. I just want to raise this issue quickly of the principal shareholder mindset. The principal shareholder's mindset and ideology flows through into the board, and it flows through into the C-suite. The C-suite doesn't necessarily last there because of incompetence, right, in inverted commas, but because they are not aligned to the ideology of the principal shareholder. And so that's where the power debate comes in that top leadership owners, you know where they stand on issues of consequence. The decisions that businesses make, especially at the C-suite level, they reflect this. They reflect the principal shareholder, even though he or she may keep his distance. But the direction, the flow, the thought process, the ideology is coming directly from there. And some of the things that we've spoken up against as the BMF, etc. When you now have a chair who should know better on a board, has a spat with a CE who he or she is supposed to be mentoring. In most cases, it's been black women who've been CEOs, but they cross swords, and you want to unravel what's the issue. It's not a competence matter. It's an ideological matter. That's another tension that exists. And so with the work Dr. Khoza does at IOD and other places, we really need to zoom in on how we can change that mindset for it to be Ubuntu driven, because we want to create a new wave of owners who think and behave differently. So we're dealing with an old order way of thinking and doing business and running organizations, when in actual fact, Ubuntu belongs to us. We're trying to find a different way to co-create and to coexist and to build a country we've never seen before. So as we are transforming, we're transforming into something that we can't put our fingers on, but from what we can tell that we want to destroy three things: poverty, inequality, unemployment, but that needs a special type of new leadership. And as we co-create and collaborate as we ought to do and deepen, that should be our target. Thank you.
And being told what to think. So I think I'm just curious in terms of what are your thoughts on the emergence of AI and how it's impacting critical thinking and how that's going to filter into future leadership?
Three thoughts on that. I was invited last year to a consulting company to do work on that. And we actually turned the idea around. Instead of providing answers, it's about asking questions still. It's deeply interrogating what's actually going on. And I think that's where we are. And that's against the tide of AI makes everything possible. So that's a real difference. You know, you have to really do strong thinking and strong action to withhold the urge, you know, to actually go with that. And at the same time, you need to invest. Everyone that I speak is asked to invest. How do you invest? Where do you invest? In a complete complex and very difficult to navigate space. So that's the questioning is the first pace. On the generational question, well, I'm old enough to have heard as a young person that TV is the nightmare that kind of ruins our thinking, right? So there's, again, we need to step back and think, what is the essence of the difference that we see today? And that's kind of the starting point for me. So what do the algorithms tell us? Who decides about the algorithm? Who earns money with that? Based on what logic? And what are the civil liberties that are at risk in these ideas? You know, so but also what's the potential? We can't just take, you know, call it, you know, a devil's product. On the one hand, it has potential, but I think we need more clarity, and we need to hold people to account on these products, if you think about it. And I think there's a real issue around accountability on the things that we've been delivered to actually fulfill the potential that it has. Not engaging is not an option, unfortunately. That's the real difficulty. It's you know, we don't know a lot. The people providing have a huge, you know, principal agency advantage, right? Because they know what their things are doing. They also know what they shouldn't be doing and not telling us. And so with that you know, in that space, we need to, you know, act. I think there's a huge opportunity to learn from young people because they're curious. They might be, you know, experiment easier than I would do with these things. By that, they have more lived experience with tools and opportunities, whether this is in your operation model, is how it changes leadership. I think there's huge opportunity to actually listen and learn how they deal with that and what they find positive or difficult and enhancing and helpful. And so there's a big resource that we should have. But it's a key question. You know, it's questioning this. It's still, we are at that stage, but being under pressure to invest. And it's a big test to me of our generation on the how to engage with that so that it is good for civilization and addresses some of the problems that we spoke about, but we don't repeat some of the mistakes that we did with oil and other resources we had over the years, where we kind of failed to really understand the long-term implications. It's a very difficult question. It's not going away, unfortunately. And I think we can be activists and co-create that by our own engagement.
So my question would be, in relation to this compunction that we're trying to build into a system, how do we do that, considering that there's complexity as individuals, and that complexity that rests within us influences our free will and our influence over the compartments or departments that we are leading. Yeah.
I would like to invite you to read the foreword to the book by the foreword was written by President Mbeki, or former President Mbeki, whose intellect I really respect. And he and I engage in debate open-mindedly. Now, in commenting on the book, in his foreword, he asserts that we are dealing with the knowns, quoting as it were one Rumsfeld, but adapted. We are dealing with the knowns, and we are dealing with the unknowns, and we have to grapple further with dealing with the unknown unknowns. So there is a sense in which this contribution is reducing the degree to which the unknowns actually handicap us, and tries to go further to deal with the unknown unknowns. And his conclusion is that Khoza has regained a little bit of the territory that needs to be regained by humanity. So all I would suggest is that you enter the fray. We cannot externalize things to so-called professors. In fact, a good number of the professors we have to work with are very, very unprofessorial. So the thinking is not the exclusive reserve of those who have labels. The thinking belongs to you and me and everybody else. So I will just invite you to inter alia read the foreword by President Mbeki. Unfortunately, to read that foreword, you have to get yourself the book. But in addition to that, just before this book, this is sort of book 9 that I've either authored or co-authored. Just before that, we have a 3-volume compendium titled The South African Handbook of Agency, Freedom, and Justice. And we're dealing there with contributions from 67 experts, 67 thought leaders in their own right. Whether you're talking about education, or you're talking about policy, about politics, about knowledge systems, about medicine, about health, it's contained in a 3-volume compendium. So I would actually invite you to actually familiarize yourself with the content.
Just one sentence: leadership is everyone's job. Full stop, exclamation mark. Comes with different areas of responsibility. Don't wait until you're asked, go for it. And basically also the session today, think about what you take away from this session. You know, otherwise it's just an intellectual activity. So what do? What are the one or two things? I stop there, but you open the microphone. Never do that with a professor. Never.
And I just want to close off with one thing around authentic leadership. Authentic leadership is to lead without ego. Lead without ego, but rather lead with humility and service by creating a better society. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much.